Welcome to the deep dive. Ever stop and think about what military tech looks like away from the movie screens? Planes like the F-35, the B-2 Spirit, what can they really do? Today, we're digging into a whole stack of sources, articles, some research papers, even some interesting stuff from online forums. We want to unpack what makes these aircraft so revolutionary. We'll get into how stealth actually works, the surprisingly big role AI is starting to play, and what it all might mean for, the future of conflict itself.
Yeah, our mission today is really to pull out the key insights for you. Think of it as a shortcut to getting up to speed on this stuff, which is changing so fast. And we want to focus not just on the what, but the why it matters, and frankly, the pretty profound implications.
Okay, let's dive right in. These machines, the F-35, the B-2, what makes them stand out? Why are they called, the apex predators of modern air warfare?
Well, it really starts with what they call low observable technology. That's the technical term for stealth. Think about radar. It sends out a signal, waits for it to bounce back, like an echo. The further away something is, the weaker that echo. Stealth tech tries to make that echo absolutely tiny.
Right, minimize the signature. But how's a plane as big as the B-2? I mean, it's huge. How does it just vanish from radar? Is it like some kind of sci-fi cloaking device?
Not quite magic, but
Yeah.
definitely some very clever science and engineering. The B-2's shape, that sort of flying wing design, it's not just for looks. It's specifically designed to deflect radar waves away from the radar source instead of bouncing them back. Think of it like angling a mirror so the light doesn't shine back at you. And it's not only the shape, there are also special materials, coatings on the surface, that actually absorb radar energy, so less energy bounces back. It's a huge contrast to, say, a normal airliner, which has lots of flat surfaces and corners that are basically perfect reflectors for radar.
Okay, so shaping and absorbing, that's fascinating. Now, the F-35, people often call it a flying combat system or even a flying computer. What's behind that description? It sounds like more than just stealth.
Oh, absolutely. The F-35 is essentially a node in a network, a sensor powerhouse.
Right.
Its main job isn't just flying, it's collecting and processing vast amounts of information. We're talking terabytes of data every single mission. It pulls data from its own radar, infrared sensors, electronic warfare systems, but it also fuses data from other F-35s, from drones, from ground control, satellites, everything. It builds this incredibly detailed 360-degree real-time picture of the entire battle space for the pilot. One former Air Force science chief actually called this sensor fusion an early form of AI.
Wow, terabytes. So that fusion helps the pilot, right? Reduces the cognitive burden, as they say, lets them focus on the big picture.
Exactly. It takes away a lot of the mental juggling. And a huge piece of that is the helmet.
Ah.
The F-35 helmet is, well, it's legendary. Costs something like $400,000. It literally lets the pilot see through the floor of the aircraft using external cameras. Gives them total situational awareness. All the flight info, sensor data, targeting, it's projected right onto the visor. They can target weapons just by looking at something. It's got night vision built in. It's incredible technology. And powering all this, you've got the F-135 engine. Super powerful, efficient, helps manage all the heat from the electronics, allows the pilot to really focus on the mission.
Okay, so the F-35 pilot is almost like a conductor orchestrating all this data. But what happens when AI starts taking on more of that conducting role, or even making some of the decisions? That's where things get really interesting, isn't it?
That's exactly where we're heading. AI is really starting to transform things, allowing machines to do complex jobs with less and less direct human input. It's a big leap from the drones we're used to, the ones flown by someone on the ground, to these newer systems where the machine itself is making more on-the-spot decisions. Surveillance, jamming, even deciding when and where to strike.
Okay, AI making strike decisions. That sounds, pretty significant. Can you give us a concrete example, something that shows the shift happening now?
Sure. Look at the XQ-58A Valkyrie. It's an unmanned combat drone developed by Kratos. The key thing is it's powered by an AI system called HiveMind from Shield AI. This lets it fly missions, navigate, even potentially engage targets without needing GPS or constant communication links. That's huge in contested environments. It can handle surveillance, electronic warfare, precision strikes, all in areas where GPS might be jammed. And this isn't just theory. Back in 2023, the Air Force Research Lab had an AI fully control a tactical jet in complex air combat maneuvers for 3 hours.
3 hours. Fully autonomous. Wow. And I read the U.S. Air Force wants over 1,000 of these kinds of AI drones by 2028, part of this collaborative combat aircraft program. What does that mean for actual combat, this manned-unmanned teaming?
Yeah, the CCA program is a massive push. Over 1,000 unmanned AI-driven warplanes by 2028. Air Force Secretary Frank Kendall, he's been very clear. He sees it as a security risk not to have it. The idea of man-unmanned teaming is basically having pilots and aircraft like the F-35 act as quarterbacks, directing teams of these autonomous drones like the Valkyrie or maybe Anduril's Fury drone. So the F-35 pilot might manage, say, 4 or 5 of these CCAs. It spreads out capabilities, increases mass, makes things potentially less costly, and reduces risk to human pilots. AI is the absolute foundation for this. It handles analyzing drone footage, recognizing targets, tracking them, navigating autonomously. In Ukraine, for example, they're using AI to sift through huge amounts of intelligence data, doing work that would take humans vastly longer. Apparently, it replaces like 99% of the human labor in some specific tasks.
Okay, so AI is boosting efficiency, processing data, but are we seeing concrete improvements in things like hitting the right target? Or drones flying better on their own?
Definitely. Take automatic target recognition, or ATR. AI-powered ATR can lock onto targets, identify equipment, even tell decoys from real threats, sometimes from kilometers away. It doesn't get tired, doesn't get stressed like a human operator might. It's very persistent, and it's getting much better at dealing with camouflage or attempts to hide things. Then there's autonomous navigation. This is making drone operations way more successful. We're seeing engagement rates jump from maybe 10–20% for some manually intensive missions up to 70 or even 80% with good autonomous navigation. Because the drone doesn't need that constant vulnerable communication link back to base. It can handle itself even if jammed. And that efficiency means cost savings too. Instead of sending, say, 8 or 9 drones hoping one gets through, you might only need 1 or 2 effective autonomous ones. That changes the economics. Ukraine has really become a living lab for this. They're developing AI software incredibly fast, training models quickly, using open source tech, encrypting it, really pushing the envelope.
Which brings us back to that big question. Lockheed Martin talking about a pilot-optional F-35. Is this really heading towards fully autonomous war? Could pilots become optional?
Well, it's crucial to be clear about the levels of autonomy. Most systems today are what we call human in the loop, semi-autonomous. The machine might suggest actions, but a human has to approve, especially for using weapons. Then there's human on the loop. More autonomous, the system operates largely on its own, but a human is monitoring and can step in. The goal, especially in places like Ukraine, is often stated as getting soldiers out of direct danger by using more autonomous systems. But fully autonomous systems, machines finding, deciding, and engaging targets entirely on their own without human oversight in that specific decision, that's still mostly an aspiration, not the current reality across the board. Human oversight, especially for lethal force, remains critical. For now.
Okay, for now.
Yeah.
But if that line keeps moving, if machines get more autonomous in making life or death decisions, what about the ethics? Human rights, how does the law even handle that?
That's the massive challenge everyone's grappling with. From a legal and ethical standpoint, autonomous weapon systems run into serious problems. Think about international law principles like necessity and proportionality. Force should only be used when necessary, and the harm caused shouldn't be excessive compared to the military goal. Can an AI truly make those nuanced judgments? Can it understand context, subtle cues, maybe de-escalate a situation? Many argue it can't, which could make its use of force arbitrary, potentially unlawful. It also bumps up against fundamental ideas of human dignity, which is core to international humanitarian law. And then there's distinction telling civilians from combatants, proportionality again weighing civilian harm. These require complex, context-dependent human judgment that AI struggles with.
And beyond just the act of engaging a target, what about other risks? You hear about algorithmic bias, privacy. How could these systems violate rights in maybe less obvious ways?
Those are huge systemic risks, absolutely. Algorithmic bias is a well-documented problem in AI generally. If the data used to train these systems reflects existing societal biases, the AI will replicate them. We've seen studies showing facial recognition is less accurate for people of color, especially women with darker skin. Imagine that kind of bias applied in a targeting system could put entire groups at higher risk of being misidentified and wrongly targeted. That's a massive violation of rights to security and non-discrimination. And privacy. Just developing these AI tools often requires collecting enormous amounts of data. Biometric data, tracking cell phones, repurposing commercial data, often through mass surveillance. This kind of widespread data harvesting raises serious questions about necessity and proportionality under privacy rights law.
Wow. And then there's the nightmare scenario, right? Proliferation, these things getting everywhere. It sounds like something out of, I don't know, Terminator.
It's a very, very serious concern. Unlike, say, nuclear weapons that require rare materials and massive infrastructure, Some types of autonomous weapons, especially smaller lethal drones, sometimes called slaughter bots, could be relatively cheap to mass produce. They wouldn't need exotic materials. They could be easy to transport, hard to track. The risk is they flood the black market, ending up with terrorists, dictators, warlords, anyone. It could completely destabilize global security in ways we haven't seen before. Reducing this risk is a major focus for international security experts.
So given all these frankly terrifying possibilities, what's being done? Are world leaders, legal experts, are they trying to get ahead of this? Put some rules in place.
Yes, definitely. There's a growing international movement. Right now, over 129 countries are calling for urgent negotiations on a new legally binding treaty to prohibit certain types of autonomous weapons and regulate others. They're aiming to get this done by the end of 2026. The idea is for this treaty to be really broad, cover development, production, use, in peacetime and wartime. It needs to cover any system that can select and engage targets on its own to be sort of future-proof. Key things they're talking about regulating include making sure these systems are predictable, reliable, traceable, ensuring there's always context-appropriate human oversight for critical decisions. Also, things like limiting where and how long they can operate, having human override or deactivation switches, maybe self-destruct mechanisms if they go wrong, avoiding use in civilian areas, and crucially, actively working to find and fix biases in the AI. But the absolute bottom line for many is preserving meaningful human control over the actual decision to use force, preventing machines from autonomously changing their mission goals.
Okay, so we've gone from the skies, the incredible tech of the F-35 and B-2 stealth, sensor fusion, all the way to AI drones, autonomous decisions, and these really deep ethical and legal questions. It's undeniable these advances offer huge strategic advantages. They're changing how militaries operate.
Absolutely. The engineering behind the F-35 and B-2 is stunning, and AI is clearly making military operations more efficient, more capable in many ways. But as we've laid out, this leap forward forces us to confront some incredibly difficult questions about ethics, law, accountability, questions that, honestly, the world is just starting to figure out how to answer.
So where does that leave you listening to this?
Well, the big challenge now, as this tech just keeps accelerating, is how do we build the rules, the norms, the frameworks to make sure these incredibly powerful tools are used responsibly? How do we make sure they serve humanity, not undermine our basic principles? Can we actually guarantee accountability when the decision maker might be lines of code? Can we ensure human judgment remains central when systems are designed for speed and independence? Yeah, and think about this. As AI gets better at making what look like independent choices in really complex situations, what does meaningful human control actually mean? Not just on a battlefield, but anywhere AI impacts life and death decisions. And maybe the deepest question, can a machine ever truly understand the concept of last resort? Definitely something to chew on long after this deep dive ends.